On this week's show, we'll be discussing the latest app developments set to revolutionise the transportation, music and financial industries. Just what is going on with Uber, Snapcash and Apple Beats Music.
We'll also be reviewing the Hanks Writer app, explaining how to play PC games on your iPad, and discussing why the App Store is turning red. I'll also be explaining what I've uncovered this week in my adventures on the dark web using the Tor Red Onion browser.
And we'll be making a stand against product placement and advertising on our show.
Hello, I'm Cameron.
And I'm Luke. We're here from Free Deal Studio, keeping you up to date with the latest app news and releases.
This is App to Date.
On this week's show, we have a very important announcement to make.
We have made the decision to exclude any and all advertising from our shows entirely. Yes, entirely. We've all heard, one of those podcasts where hosts awkwardly read out ready-made lines from their sponsors. It's not only annoying, but it's a waste of your time and theirs, because let's face it, no one really cares.
After discussing this for a couple of weeks, we feel sponsored adverts just do not belong on our show. You already get bombarded enough with ads on TV, radio and even YouTube, so this show should be a bit of a welcome break from that. Not just adding to the problem.
And I mean, a lot of these people, they do sound like glorified internet street hawkers, and we just really don't want to be a part of that.
From now on, we'll be including show notes and links in the description of each episode.
Now that iTunes have finally enabled HTML links,
where you can find out how to support us. That includes links to our Patreon account and links to all of our websites.
So Luke, do you want to start us off this week with high industry news?
Okay, starting off with the music industry. Apple's plans for Beat Music are becoming a little bit more in focus this week. Last May, Apple acquired Beats Music for $3 billion. Until now, the plans for development have been quiet as a church mouse. Apple intends to include Beats Music in its future versions of iOS. All of this information comes from an anonymous source, so its credibility is up for question, but Apple are working to make a streaming music service cheaper for customers. It is rumoured that Apple have begun discussions with record labels over new licensing terms that will allow them to drop monthly subscriptions for the price of Beat Music as low as $5 a month. Significantly lower than all other music streaming services that use the major record labels. According to an anonymous source, the labels are declining this price at the moment as they are seeking a better deal. This all comes at the same time that Sony and its major record label, Sony Music Entertainment, are re-evaluating music streaming services after Taylor Swift's snub. Now theoretically, if Sony or any of the other three major labels decide to pull out of streaming services or ask for more money, this could drive customers away from those services and increase the price dramatically. However, Spotify doesn't even seem fazed by this, as they have released plans this week to expand their staff by up to 2,000 employees, which could double their team. So if you're looking for a job, send them a message, why not? So what do you think of this, Cameron? Do you think if one of these labels pull out, it could cause a major push-on effect? Or do you reckon it would influence the other labels to reevaluate how they're doing it?
Yeah, no, I think absolutely that Spotify, they're at risk. As you said, there's three major labels. If one of them is removed, that's thousands and thousands of artists that are no longer going to be with Spotify. It's really interesting actually that Apple have gone for this $5 a month and how they're going to angle that. And that's being launched along with the rebranding of Beats, the actual headphones, which Apple have taken over now, which is going to be incredibly interesting.
Well, I think what Apple have identified here is that there are so many other ways to do it other than what's currently being done. So what we sort of identified here is that there are several ways that you could actually do this business, but Spotify and all the other streaming services have failed to address at the moment, and Apple could well be addressing. I mean, we could see it so that you pay $5 a month and then you can only hear one song 3 times before you actually have to purchase that song. Or perhaps we could see a tiering system where it comes out on CD first and then the back catalogue is eventually put onto streaming services. There are several ways to do this that just aren't being addressed. And at the moment, we aren't compensating the artists fairly. And we could be doing so if we just worked at it a little bit. There's no reason they absolutely couldn't do it. It would pretty much be the same price for the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to this kind of culture of self-entitlement, or this culture of entitlement where everyone expects things for free, and creatives, at the end of the day, are the people who are paying the price because they're putting all this hard work and effort into producing this wonderful material, which people don't want to pay for. And how they think that that's going to be sustainable, I don't know. I mean, we spoke about that in quite some depth in the last podcast. So it's interesting to see how it's developed with people looking at what Taylor Swift has done and the windowing, I believe, they call it the windowing technique of releasing a CD and then releasing to iTunes and then releasing to streaming services. I mean, more people are learning because there's millions and millions of pounds being left on the table here. You've got to be mad not to pick it up.
Maybe we could send our money to Taylor Swift using Snapcash. Now, the financial industry at the moment is getting a bit of a shake-up with the current systems being taken down and rebranded and restructured, and NFC chips coming out and peer-to-peer payment transactions. All manner of things are happening in the financial industry that could really, really shake it up in the next couple of years. Last week, we briefly got to throw in Snapchat. We're launching Snapcash, but unfortunately, the news came out about 7 hours after we recorded the show and about an hour before we actually broadcast it, so we had to quickly edit something in, and we didn't get a wider discussion on the issue. For a long time now, me and Cameron have been saying that all these new peer-to-peer messaging services must be racing for something. And what we decided that they're probably racing for is peer-to-peer transactions. We thought that Facebook would probably be there first, being one of the biggest social networks out there, but we were flabbergasted when Snapchat got there first. Anyone who missed the story of Snapchat last week, they have released a service called Snapcash, which will allow users to send money via Square. Now, as we all know, Snapchat is a super non-encrypted, super unsafe platform, but it appears they're actually shaping up their act and banning third-party apps from developing as parasites from theirs. Despite not closing the holes, they are alerting the users to the issue and using Square in order to make encrypted transactions, who are relatively trustworthy.
Square have a lot of experience in this. I mean, they've completely taken over the American market. I mean, over here we have the iZettle, and a lot of people have been waiting for Square to come over to the UK.
One of the weirdest things about Snapchat even bothering to create one of these services is that over half of their users are under age 17. And in order to make the financial transactions using Snapcash and Square, you actually have to be 18 or older. So this could pose a serious issue from them when compared to other networks that could potentially do the same thing. So have Snapchat made a bad call on this?
I think so, yeah. They're kind of desperate to monetize at the moment. And I mean, they've partnered up with Square, which is a fantastic move because they are a trustworthy and well-established payment provider. However, the fact that over 50% of their users are under 17 and can't even use the service to begin with, and the number of Square users is relatively small as well anyway, might have been kind of a bit of a misjudgment.
Will this drive new users to Snapchat, do you think? I personally think it won't drive new users to Snapchat because of its reputation.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Snapchat is still, I mean, it's a kid's toy. It's something that's used in classrooms, in playgrounds, in college dorms to a lesser extent, but certainly not by people who would go there just to make a transaction.
Yeah, what if I could cross-reference leaked photos of you using facial recognition software and then blackmail you into making transactions using the same app? I'm not saying anybody should do that. I'm just saying it's certainly a possibility, and my level of Snapchat trust is very, very low. Square was actually founded by one of the creators of Twitter, Jack Dorsey. Last week we reported Twitter too were looking into creating a standalone private messaging app, so perhaps they could team up with him again and create a little bit of something inside their new app.
Maybe. I mean, there's plenty of rumours about a peer-to-peer payment service being in Twitter, and Twitter being less about your personal friendships and your personal connections than, say, Snapchat or Facebook, I think does put them at a disadvantage. I mean, we've discussed that in the show. So maybe Twitter will be one of the later networks to come onto the kind of financial transaction scene, and hopefully they'll be focusing more on their new video card, which I'm very excited about.
So Square themselves have been pretty busy this week launching what's called Register. Register is a free point-of-service payment app for Android and iOS. The services are only available in the US, Canada and Japan at the moment. However, I don't think it's going to go very far. It has a 2.75% transaction fee, which is significantly higher than the existing marketplace from the likes of Amazon and PayPal. So could be completely wrong. I could be eating my hat next week that I've bought with my Square account. But I don't think that'll go that far. But it's good to see that we're taking financial transactions away from the old-timey powers. But speaking about old-timey things, we got this beautiful little vintage-esque Hanks writer. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely, Luke. I've been checking out the Hanks Writer app. Vintage being a very popular theme of 2014 seems to have influenced everything from music to fashion. What's that song about your granddad's clothes, Luke?
A Macklemore thrift shop.
Thrift shop, yep, exactly. Well, now even apps are getting involved with the fun. With the app Hanks Writer for iPad, bring back the clickety-clack of the mechanical typewriter. This app is far more fun and entertaining to use than the conventional word processor and features pretty realistic sound effects and animation. The ability to easily export an authentic looking typed up print to PDF is another useful feature. And interestingly, the app has been developed by Tom Hanks. Yes, the Tom Hanks, along with hisense.com Inc., meaning that every time I open it, I can't help but think of all the best parts of Castaway and Forrest Gump, which might explain the subconscious hold the app seems to have on me. The only downside for me is that it has a slightly iffy built-in spell checker, but I haven't had any problems typing on the screen of the iPad mini.
Not many typewriters have a spell checker, so that's pretty
Exactly,
exceptional.
it puts you in an advantage straight away. And while I would certainly recommend the app to people who either keep a diary or like to write short stories, I wouldn't recommend the Hanks Writer as an everyday word presser for the lack of robust spelling and grammar checker and the limited formatting options. Although the free version is perfectly usable in its own right, I've paid for the full version just to show my support for the app, and anyone with an iPad should download the app immediately. You won't be disappointed. And they actually look like a piece of paper that's been printed on. So what we're going to do is we're going to type up the show notes, save them to a PDF, and enable you to download them in the Hanks Writer style font. I mean, it looks wonderful from our website, so be sure to check that out.
Okay, well, I'm going to be using that to write a strongly worded letter to Facebook. Our friends over at Facebook this week announced that they're releasing another standalone app, this time for groups. They claim that over 700 million of its users use groups of their 1.35 billion users. With the amount of ridicule over the messaging app, was it worth it?
I think there's probably more of a reason to create a standalone groups app than there is for a standalone messaging service, because the groups they're quite significantly different to the general Facebook usage. Messaging your friends on Facebook is something that you should be able to do within the Facebook app. It's what it's been designed for. But the groups, there's a lot of people who are running sort of grassroots political campaigns. I mean, we had one here that I helped set up with my sister actually, which was Save Coldblow Woods, and that was to stop the local woodland being taken over by developers and turned into a cricket field, which is, it's actually being turned into some houses. Shock. And I can see, standalone app, that being really useful, because I can see notifications coming from there that aren't interfering with my normal Facebook profile, but I'm able to add people from my Facebook listing. So that for me would be useful.
How many things can they take away from the main app before they've just completely taken away the main app? For me, the only thing that could possibly be taken off of the main app that would be really useful is if event notifications came off of the app and put into a separate app. They're not really part of what Facebook feels like it's about. So maybe if they had a standalone app for that, it'd be a bit different. But I really can't see what extra is being offered with a group app. I can see when they created a messaging app, they said to themselves, oh, secretly we'll be doing this peer-to-peer payment thing. I cannot see in any way what they could be doing behind the scenes in these group chats.
Well, it could well be crowdfunding in the future, and that people set up a group with maybe an idea in mind. I mean, essentially it is an extension of the Messenger app. It's just a big chat room for it, instead of one-on-one messaging.
Because we could just have a groups and pages newsfeed. Pages we obviously don't see enough of because we subscribe to them and then they've been taken away from us over time. And now the owners of pages have to pay huge amount of money just to reach their own audience, which is a bit of an outrage for anybody who uses pages. But back in our historic episode 7, which was one of the turning points for this show, where we discussed the hearsay of Facebook were going to release this encrypted messenger that would allow users to communicate not using their real names. Is this going to be part of that, do you think? Do you reckon this will be some sort of online forum that will be there'll be the actual app and then there'll be a secondary app where you can remain anonymous? Or do you think I'm just making this up off the top of my head?
There's been an app released called Rooms.
Okay.
which does exactly what you've just said. Now, Rooms was set up by Facebook, but the Rooms app basically is an anonymous chat service that takes the form of a mix between groups, messaging, and the old, if you might remember these, the old AOL chat rooms.
Yep.
Yeah, and it condenses that into an app. Whether Facebook are going to emulate that, or if there's any point of that even, I don't know.
Viber have released a similar app to that recently, claiming that there'll be celebrities on there and whatnot. But ultimately, like you say, it is very similar to the AOL group chats, and it's not too far off any of the existing group chat. Even Fire Chat is pretty close to what we're talking about here, so I really don't see the point in that.
Oh, I agree.
They've also announced that they will be doing end-to-end encryption on WhatsApp messaging to stop the NSA or them snooping on you. That's a pretty large development for Facebook, to be honest.
Now, I've heard this has been endorsed by Edward Snowden.
Yeah.
And which is, I mean, that's quite groundbreaking, really, actually. Now, the Open Whisper system uses something called a text secure protocol to essentially scramble messages in transit, hiding whatever is inside from prying eyes. So this sounds like this is actually going to be a really robust, secure and private messaging service. Those things you don't really typically associate with Facebook, do you?
No. So Cameron, what else have you been up to this week?
Well, I've got some more interesting news on Monument Valley and the RED campaign. The App Store is hosting a 2-week fundraising and HIV/AIDS awareness campaign, which started on Monday and runs until December the 7th. The charity behind the campaign, RED, which was started in 2006 by U2 frontman Bono, has a mission to rid the world of HIV/AIDS and will turn the campaign's proceeds over to the Global Fund, with an aim to help provide antiviral treatment to AIDS sufferers in Africa. Now, Apple have already raised $75 million for the charity, and this time decided to focus on encouraging iOS developers to become more deeply involved with the cause. Apple approached the top 25 best-selling app creators and asked the companies to customize their products with RED theme tweaks and additional features to help them promote the campaign. In response, Monument Valley have offered a whole new chapter to the game, Ida's Red Dream, marking the final expansion to the game in support of Apple's Apps Red campaign. 100% of your purchases of this game will go to the charity during the campaign. That's 100%. So to the premium advocates, your sense of entitlement should not extend to this app. And if you're going to complain about it, I will hunt you down. Because this is, I mean, it's a great example of premium doing something positive. I mean, people are paying, $2.99 for this expansion for the game. It's well worth it. There's the 25 top apps. I mean, there's racing games which have customized tracks, competitions, cars, characters, skins. It's fantastic, and it shows that, kind of as we mentioned earlier, there is this happy-go-lucky vibe about the app development community, and this is supporting that. And this is another great example of Tim Cook working very hard to clean up Apple's image and, keep this kind of friendly, proactive, and pro-human element to the company.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully support any charity endorsements, especially from Apple being one of the biggest corporations in the world.
With a very clinical website.
With a very clinical website.
Beautiful, but very clinical.
The transportation industry this week has taken yet another hit from Uber. Like I said last week, this is Transportation Revolution 2.5, and we're really about to see another wave of expansion with the ride-sharing apps. This week there's been a whole ton of developments, so I'll quickly skim through them and then we'll have a quick discussion. Ride-sharing service Uber expands into the Nordics. So Finland, Norway and Denmark now have Uber services in their capital cities. Also launching Uber Go, which is a low-cost car-for-hire service in India, claiming that it's the cheapest ride in town. They say it is cheaper than an auto rickshaw. Now, in response to this, Ola, formerly Ola Cabs, have released an app, and you guessed it, it summons rickshaws.
It summons rickshaws, great.
in a similar way to how Uber does. So that's a little bit of competition there, and that's a perfect example of the marketplace expanding and competing with the newer powers. I think that's an absolutely fantastic story. A US entrepreneur has considered suing Uber over tracking their activities and broadcasting them to a room full of people. Now, following that, Uber hired a team to help them fix their privacy issues. Clearly unrelated. Despite this fact, their executives actually use a tool called God view in order to see all activities on their app. So I guess that shows their mindset a little.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. It has It has also been announced that Uber and other taxi booking apps will be regulated in Singapore. Hopefully this will be something that we get to see expand into other countries and other cities. This will be the first time that anybody has attempted to regulate such services, so we'll see how it goes and we'll lead by their example. Uber's executives have been reported in BuzzFeed to have suggested spending millions in order to hire a team to dig up dirt on critics. So I think they're awesome.
Of course you do, Luke.
So, Cameron, what do you make of this, the dig up the dirt story?
Well, I've actually heard that the senior executive responsible for this, he was threatening a female journalist who had publicly criticised the company. And his defence was that he thought he wasn't being recorded, as if that was a defence. I mean, it's disgusting. They've caused a lot of controversy, they've upset a lot of people, but, I mean, arguably, Uber wouldn't exist if the competition wasn't so bad. I read a really interesting comment on The Guardian actually, explaining how in most major cities, taxis have been controlled by a small number of rent-seeking companies that own all the licenses and then rent out vehicles to drivers at what can only really be described as an extortionate rate. So we end up with drivers spending a miserable life ripping off customers and generally working long hours for not much money. And there in contrast, we have Uber, which, despite all the problems, their drivers are guaranteed their fare with no drunken idiots running away. They can rate their passengers, so, sleazy passengers, annoying passengers, violent passengers, they quickly get turfed out of the service, which is, it's greatly encouraged women to become Uber drivers because they feel they've got that safety net there. And, the drivers don't start a shift already down hundreds of pounds, dollars, bitcoins, whatever, to their employers for having to pay for these licenses or having to rent these vehicles. I mean, the result is that now you can get an Uber car in many places that cabs just simply won't go to because it's too expensive for them to waste time driving back to a profitable place, like a town or city centre, whereas the Uber driver will turn up within minutes rather than hours and seems to be a much happier and less stressed out person.
One of the big problems with this, and one of the big problems of us reporting this on this show, has been that Uber is not technically a tech company. They're only as much of a tech company as Marks and Spencer's or Walmart. Uber is almost an Internet of Things service, but it's not quite. If these were self-driving cars, everyone would consider this an Internet of Things service. But because you're summoning real people and real drivers, they actually turn up to your house. You're actually doing a physical business here. I don't know, maybe there should be safer regulations on it, but at the moment it seems like most customers are most pleased with how Uber is going.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, primarily, Uber is a company that's using technology in order to operate in an offline world. It's not an online business, despite the fact that they borrow some important elements of purely internet business models, for example, being a platform. So they put buyers in touch with sellers and they take a cut. And I mean, they obviously harvest a lot of data, which has been, another thing that's been causing a lot of controversy. But I mean, as you said, if the demand wasn't there, the company wouldn't be there. And I mean, going into quite some secretive and controversial technology, I've been quite active on the dark web or the hidden internet this week, accessing secret sites using the Tor Onion browser. And what I found isn't online drug and weapons suppliers, but actually a collection of manifestos and political ideologies that all seem to gravitate towards a central theme: agorism. Now, if you've not heard of agorism, I'm not going to go too in-depth with this, but essentially, agorism is a political ideology that promotes peaceful revolution through alternative strategies, not politics, in order to achieve a free society. This includes education, direct action, alternative currencies, such as Bitcoin, entrepreneurship, self-sufficiency, and most importantly in this case, counter-economics. Many of the tech companies and internet-based organisations we're seeing today and reporting on in this show, everything from Tor, Bitcoin, WikiLeaks, Anonymous, and even to some extent Uber, are proponents of agorism. So are we all engaging in a secret revolution by using these services?
Yeah, I hope so. A revolution without any of us knowing. It just sort of passes us all by and we don't get anybody hurt.
That's it, it's the passive revolution.
The passive revolution. That is going to be the title of this episode.
Well, I've been adding a few new fans to my PC because I've been kind of getting into PC gaming again.
Lots of people are very into your PC, aren't they?
They are very into my PC, yeah, they are. Including my iPad, because this week I started experimenting with the iPad's ability to play PC-only games by streaming the games to my iPad from the PC over my local Wi-Fi network. Now, using the Splashtop app, I was able to remotely control my PC and play major titles, including Skyrim and Final Fantasy XIV, from the device via Steam with almost zero technical problems. Which I was really impressed by this, Luke. This is a really robust app. And it was well worth the money.
This actually ties in with something I was saying a couple of weeks ago, that I think that the future of technology is to have a piece of technology somewhere else and stream it into a much smaller piece of technology in your hand, so that you don't have to constantly downsize processors and things like that. It's definitely the way of the future, and if you've already stumbled across it, I'm going to be following what you're about to say very carefully.
Excellently, yep, absolutely. It matched up perfectly with what you were saying last week, Luke. You was a bit of a sage there, actually. The only drawbacks I found were that the graphics were a bit watered down and the controls were a little bit sketchy. I mean, we're going from a PC keyboard and mouse to a touchscreen tablet. However, I discovered a really interesting feature that actually allows users to map out their own custom controls in the form of selective keyboard buttons and an on-screen joystick, which was amazing. I mean, I was playing this game pretty much effortlessly from the iPad. However, there was one major flaw, and that was Splashtop are expecting a recurring $1.99 monthly fee for the privilege of using the custom controller, which is, I mean, it's such a shame. It just completely lets down the service, in my opinion. I mean, and despite advancements in both iOS and Mac apps, particularly gaming apps, Apple are still quite far behind when it comes to serious gaming with their mobile and desktop devices, which was quite clear when I was streaming these games.
Yeah, see, the thing is, they've cross-platformed and made this ecosystem for most of their productivity apps, and it'll be really cool to see them expand that across the gaming apps. Just for example, this is a lower end game really. If you were to be playing Angry Birds on one platform on your iPad and you were about to leave the house, you don't want to take your iPad with you, if you could swipe that across to your iPhone, give it to your kid, maybe he'll score you a few points, no in-app purchases please, you'll be fine. That sounds like a lot of fun. And it's certainly a way of the future. I mean, when the games consoles companies get involved in this, I think that's when it'll blow up. And you've been saying that maybe Steam are going to get there first, but I've got an inkling that Microsoft might get there first with the Xbox, but we'll see how it goes.
We'll see, yeah. I mean, Steam are releasing the SteamOS operating system to allow you to stream your games from anywhere, using the power of your home PC, which I think is incredible. The NVIDIA Shield is a purpose-built gaming tablet, which enables you to stream your PC games on the move and connect to any smart-enabled TV to mirror the gameplay there, which I think is a great feature, because as much as I love the iPad, I can only stream it to an Apple TV, unless, I mean, there's an app where I can stream to the PC to record it, but that's my PC and I have to have a license with the app, and it only goes for that computer and this device. So to have it on the move, you'd be buying licenses left, right and centre.
These companies have been getting us used to that idea for a long time anyway. We've been using, cloud storage for ages, and it's not like you have a hard drive at home sitting there that's storing all this stuff. They're storing it. You are essentially buying up a part of Californian desert with all of your pictures of cats on it.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, cloud gaming is definitely the way forward, and people have got kind of more used to the idea with these, as Mark, the studio owner, describes them as walled gardens. So we've got the App Store, we have Steam, the Google Play Store as well. It is an interesting development, and I think if the Splashtop, talking about this example, had third-party iOS gaming controller compatibility and didn't require the monthly fee, and the graphics maybe weren't watered down quite so much, it would have been a great alternative to the NVIDIA Shield, because no one really wants to buy a specialised gaming tablet. I mean, it's a bit of an overkill really for a tablet. And okay, the Splashtop While it's definitely not the perfect choice for a hardcore gamer, the app is definitely great for remote accessing your computer for other reasons, such as managing, updating and transfer files while you're away from the home office. So I mean, I'd still say go for it, and the gaming side of it's just an additional benefit.
Okay, and with all that said, I have been Luke Besant.
And I've been Cameron Norris.
This has been iOS App to Date.
Remember to check out the notes in the description because we won't be spamming you with ads in show anymore.